Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of our full stack mobile development series. In today's episode, we are going to complete the authentication APIs. We are going to set up the verification endpoint as well as the password reset. We are also going to configure our SMTP using Google Mail because it's free, as well as test the entire authentication APIs. First, let's set up our Gmail account that's going to be used to send the verification codes to the email addresses. We visit gmail.com. On the sign-in page, we switch to create accounts for personal use. Here we are going to say Penger support. We are going to, here you can provide your personal details. I'm just going to quickly fill this form. Once you've successfully created the email address, you would want to head over to manage your Google account. Go to the security tab and we want to turn on the two-step verification. So over here, we select the turn on two-step verification and provide the phone number we used to verify the account. This will then send the 6-digit code to your phone number. Once the two-step verification is turned on, you would want to go back and then in the search bar here, type app passwords. You go ahead and choose app password. We provide the name of the app you're going to set up, and then we copy this. Now, once we have the app password, we'll head over to Visual Studio, open our .env file, and scroll down to the mail config. Over here, we are going to go ahead and remove this and paste our new password, remove all the white spaces, and provide the email address that we created. In this case, we created the email penger@gmail.com. I paste that here. Also, I would want to change the mail username and then repeat the email address. So the SMTP is going to log in with this email address and the password. We'll go ahead and change this mailer to SMTP. Now we need our SMTP host and port, and with Gmail, you can just head over to Google and type Gmail SMTP. You would then go to the developers page here and scroll down to the protocol session. So here we have the outgoing SMTP server is smtp.gmail.com. We would copy that, and we have two options for the encryption: the SSL, which goes over ports 465, and the TLS, which goes over port 587. We can use any of these. For now, we'll just use the 465, and then we set the encryption, which is SSL, as stated here. Right, we can also use TLS. In this case, we'll have to use 587. So it both works, but for now, we're just going to use SSL.465. At this point, we've set up our Laravel application to be able to send emails, which is in this case is going to be the verification code we are going to send to the user to verify the account using the Gmail account we created, which is free. Now let's go ahead and set up our endpoint for the verification. So we go to the api.php file. We go ahead and duplicate this and we say OTP. We change this to OTP. Now what happens is that when the user logs in to the system or registers, they are redirected to the verification page. That means at the time they log in or register to verify the account, they already have a token. And to make sure that we do that check, what we are going to do is we're going to use the Sanctum auth middleware. So we are going to say routes. We are going to call the middleware function, pass the name of the middleware. In this case, it's the auth middleware from Sanctum. And then we are just going to create a group so that we can have multiple routes in there. Once I'm done, I just move this in. That means anytime a user makes a request to this, they have to make a request with a valid access token in the header. Great. So we go over to the auth controller and set up our method for the OTP. We can just go ahead and duplicate this code and change this to OTP. Now at this point, we know that the user is already logged in. We do not want to validate any requests. We are just getting the user, checking the user exists in the system because we already have it from the token, and then we send them the verification code to their email address. So we can attack it in 3 steps. We first get the user. And if the user is not verified, then we send them the new verification code. So generate the OTP, we send the OTP, and then we return the response. And in this case, we are not going to return anything. We're just going to return the verification success message, which we would handle that later. Okay, now to send the verification code, we need to generate the code, store the code in our database, and then send the code via email. So first, we are going to create a new model to be used for this, and I'm going to use the integrated terminal called PHP Artisan make model, and in this case, our model is going to be OTP. Once I do the -m, the -m, it means that it would create the model file as well as the migration file. That's the only thing we need for this. Once that is done, I have the model file here and I have the migration file here. We are going to go ahead and create a few more columns for the OTP. We will first need the string, which is the code that we are going to generate. We also need another string for the type of code, whether it's a verification code or whether it's a password reset code. And we are also going to need another one for the status. In this case, I'm just going to use an integer, and we are going to say whether it's active, 0 or 1 or true or false. Right? We also need to tie the OTP to the user. So we have to introduce a foreign key constraint here. Now to do a foreign key constraint, we are going to create a new field and we say foreign ID. The name of our foreign key is the user, and it's going to be constrained on the users table. So this will create a foreign key constraint between the OTPs and the users. So a user ID would be set whenever we create this record. Good. Now once this is done, we can also add our soft delete so that we do not necessarily have to delete the record. Good. Once this is done, we go ahead and migrate our database to create the OTPs table. Perfect. So we go ahead and go back to our model. Here we have to introduce our fillables. We don't want to type all this, so we can just go ahead and copy this from here. And then here we have the user ID, the type of OTP, the code itself, and the active, which is 100. Great. So over here, we want to generate the OTP, like I said, and send the OTP via email and return the message that we've sent the OTP successfully. So we go over to our service class here. Just get rid of this. Go to our service class here and create a new method. I'm going to say public function OTP. Now this function is going to take a user class, a user model, sorry, and then it's going to return the OTP. We can also just return a boolean telling us true or false if the OTP has been sent. Good. It's complaining because we do not currently return any OTP. So here we want to generate a random code. We can confirm the number of characters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to generate random 6-digit, and we can do that by using the random function in PHP. So we say random 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the maximum is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this would create a random code between 100,000 and 999,999. So we can have something like 4, 5, 7, 2, 3, 4. Right. Good. Now, once we've generated the code, we want to store the code and then send the code as an email to the user. So we go ahead and we generate the code. We create our OTP. Here we need to have the user ID, which is our foreign key. We want to know the type of OTP this is. At this point, we are just going to say verification. We are going to make modifications to this, but we'll do that when we are doing the password reset. And then we say that the code itself is the code we just generated. And we are going to say that the status is active. So once the code has a status 0, means the code has expired and it can no longer be used. Then we return the OTP. Great. So at this point, when we go back to our controller here, we can say that the OTP is equal to this auth service OTP, and we need to pass the user, right? So that means we need to get the user at this point. And because we are using Sanctum as our middleware, if we want to get the user, we can just do auth user and we'll have our user model at this point. So with that, we just pass the user model to the class. We can also do this where we say auth user. In this case, we are going to have to import the auth class from the facade. So this is just the same as doing this, but for now, we'll just go ahead and use this. Okay, we want to clean up our imports because we never used it. Great. So here we get our user who is logged in, we generate our OTP code, and we want to send the OTP code. One thing I would also want to do is we want to move this send into this. So at this point, when the OTP code has been generated, we want to send the OTP code as an email, right? Good. Now, before we set up our email, we just want to make a quick change. Because we are going to use the verification code for security purposes, I would also want us to change this from rand to random int. And this is because random int is less predictable compared to rand, even though rand is more faster than random int. But for security purposes, I would want us to use the random int. All right, so we go ahead and set up our email. And to do that, what we are going to do is we're going to use the integrated terminal again. We'll go ahead and use artisan to create our mail. So PHP artisan make mail. In this case, is going to be the OTP mail. Now we are going to need a markdown file. Now this markdown file is going to create a view that we are going to use to design our email using HTML. So here we have the markdown file. We want to put it in a folder called mail, in the subcode folder called auth, and we are going to call this OTP, right? So now this will create the OTP file and also create our markdown file here in the views. We have mail auth and the otp.blade.php. Now, Laravel views provides you with a convenient way of separating your HTML from your controller or your application logic and the presentation logic. So now once we have this, we can look at the mail that we created. We'll create a new folder called mail and you have the OTP email. Now with this email, we can queue the email so that it's sent asynchronously, not in the main thread. And it has a subject and the markdown file that we created, right? We want to first go ahead and change the subject and say that this is your Penger verification code. So now this is the subject the user will receive. However, in this project, we do not want to hard code any of the strings. So we'll move this. We'll scroll down to our language files here. And then we are going to create the subject. So we say the OTP mail subject, right? And then we are going to put this in here. Great. Now we just go back to our mailable class here, and then we are going to call it so app.otp mail subject. Great. So whenever we want to change the subject, we can go ahead and change it from here, and then it will take effect in the mailable class. We already have the markdown file set. We are not going to send any attachment, so we leave this as blank. Okay, so we are going to open our markdown file, which is in the resources, views mail, otp.blade. So here it's going to put the body of the message here. And if we have any button, and this is the thanks and the app name, great. We do not have any button here. However, we have the email. And for the email, we are going to write a very simple message. We are going to say, hi, and we want to have the name of the user. So at this point, we say hi, and we call you the name of the user, and we say that your verification code. So here we just have to be creative and come up with a very nice verification message. So I can say we've received a request to verify your account on Penger through email, through your email address, right? So that's one line, and I say that's your verification code is, and then here, so I want to, because here I have the freedom of using HTML, I want to go ahead and do this. Now this one paragraph, there's another paragraph, and then I'm going to have another paragraph which is going to take the verification code. Great. And then we say thanks the blah 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 team. Here I would want to make the verification code bold, so I'm going to use strong on this. And then what else can we add? Maybe a nice message telling the user not to share the verification code with anybody. We can do that down here. We can tell the user do not forward this code to anybody or anything, but for now we just want to make it a very simple email. All right, so now we have our email markdown setup. Let's fix the typo here. So we received, this is the correct spelling, right? Now because this is a markdown file and I have prettier enabled, anytime I save the file it would automatically reformat. But the issue is whenever you are working with markdowns, you do not need this indentation. So if you have prettier or any other formatter, make sure that when you save this markdown file, for example, if I move this here, this is how it's supposed to be. All of them are supposed to be on the left side. If you save it, it's going to shift it, and this will cause your email not to render properly when it's being set. So make sure that you disable whatever you have reformatting your files when we are dealing with markdown files in particular. So I'm going to go ahead, disable prettier for this file, and then save it again. I'll go to my Visual Studio settings and I look for format on save, and I would disable this for now and change this again and then save it. Right, so now I have my correct email. It says you've received a request to verify your account on Penger through your email address. Your verification code is, and then the person gets the code. Thanks. Right, so now I'm done with this file. I can close it and go back to my settings and enable the prettier again. Great. Now what happens is that the file here would need the user model with the name and then the verification code. So we need to provide that in here. So we're going to create a private user and a private string, which is our code. Because we want to make it available to the view, we would rather want to make it public, so that's available to the view. And we want to import the user model here. Great. We want to inject the user and the code whenever we are sending the email. So in our constructor, we want to do the same thing where we have our user and the string, which is our code, and this would be equal to this user is equal to the user, and then we have our code, which is equal to our code. So that at this point, when this markdown file is read, the user will be available to it and the code will be available to it as required here. That means anytime you want to use this OTP email, you need to pass the user and the code in the constructor. So we come back here and then we send our email. So here we say mail to, and this would request the user, and we're going to pass our mailable class we created. So here we have the user as user, and the new email class we had was OTP mail. Remember, we need to pass the user and the verification code that we created. Okay, and we have to come here and then import the mail. Perfect. Let's review the OTP function. So first we create the code, we store the code into our database, we send the code to the user's email address, and we return the OTP. Right, now let's go back to our controller. At this point we have the OTP, everything is successful, and then we want to return the message to the user, and we want to say that verification success or OTP success. We can say OTP sent success. Good. And we go to our language file. Now we can duplicate one of these lines and we call it OTP sent success. OTP on the user side, we can say verification code sent, right? And then OTP sent success. So that's our message here. And we can come here to the controller and just to be sure. So once the message is sent, we get the user, we generate the OTP, and we return the response. We can go ahead and test this with our postman. So we duplicate one of these, we call it OTP, we change this to OTP. Now, because in our API, we are having the middleware, that means that when the user logs in here, we need to have the token and then send the token as a bearer token. So I'm going to go in here, log in as myself. Great, I have my token. I copy this token. In the OTP, I go to authorization. I switch to bearer token and I provide my current token, right? So in my body, I do not have any body. And then I go ahead and I make the request. So go ahead and then we submit. As you can see, it took a few seconds and then the verification code has been sent. That's because currently we do not have a queue that is setting up the emails to be sent in the background. So it's going to send it in the main thread. I'll just go ahead and open my email address here and then check if we have any email. Great. So as you can see, we have our beautiful email. Hi, my name shows up. We've received a request and your verification code is great. So now our system is able to send email address and verification code to the user's email address. Let's test one more thing. Assuming the user does not pass a valid bearer token, in this case, no authentication, and they send the same request, what happens? The system tells them that they are unauthenticated. If they pass the correct bearer token, the system will go ahead and send the verification code. If they send a random token, unauthenticated, right? So our system has validated the user before sending the OTP code. Now, when the user logs in, when the user registers the account, the first time we want to send them the verification code the very first time the user registers. And to do that, we will go ahead and open our auth class, auth service, sorry, and scroll down to register. So here, when the user registers, we want to send the verification code. And to do that, we have access to the verification code method here. So we just say this OTP, and then we pass the new user that we created, right? So this would generate the code, store it in the database and send it. We can go ahead and test it, and I'm going to use my email. I just come here, I go to register, and I say that body 10. Before that, let me just go back to my email inbox. I already have the 2 new ones that we sent, and then I'm going to delete them. Oh, we just leave them for now. When the new one comes, we'll be sure. Okay, and here I'm going to say new user. I want to show you the change in the name, and then we are going to go ahead and register. So once we register, we are supposed to receive an email. Great. Now we have a new email and it says, hi, new user. You have received your request, and then this is my verification code. So it goes on and on. We can test again and say new user 5. And then I'm just going to increment this to 11. And we are going to sign up again. And this is new user 5. If I go to my email, I should receive a new email. Yes, a new email has come. And it says, hi, new user 5. And you can see I have different verification code for different users. Great. At this point, we can say that we've finished with our OTP endpoint. Now we will go ahead and set up the endpoint to verify the OTP code that the user would give us to verify the account. Okay. To do that, we'll go ahead and open our routes file here, create a new route, call it verify. In this case, verify. Great. And we go to our auth controller, scroll down to here, and then create a new function. We can just go ahead and duplicate this and call it verify. Great. So here we want to validate the request because they're going to give us a verification code, and then we already have the user, and then we are going to verify the verification code. So get the user, verify OTP, and then return the response. Okay, and we can do that. Start by verifying, validating our request here. So here they're going to send us the OTP, which is required, right? It's a number, so it's numeric, right? Now we have our user, and we can say that verify user. So we pass the user, end the request. We will go ahead and go into our auth service. Here, create a new function, call it public function. Here we say verify. This will take the user model and the object of the request. Yeah, and this should return the user. Okay, once they are verified. So here we have the user. We want to check if the verification code that the user sent is valid, and to do that we say OTP is equal to OTP, where at this point I want to do multiple checks. So where the user ID matches the current user's ID, and the code is equal to the code that the user has given us in the request here. And then we want to make sure that the code is active, right? So once we check all this, then we get the first. Okay, so if the code does not exist, that means if the OTP code is wrong, or it's not the code for the user, or it's no longer active, we want to abort the entire process and throw an error to the controller, which will be returned to the user. Laravel has a wonderful helper called the abort, and here we're going to pass the error code and the message. So here we're going to say 422, and the message in this case will be invalid verification code. Okay, now remember, like we said, we do not want to hard code any of these strings, so we'll go ahead and move this over to our language files. So we go to our app language, and here we are going to create a new one. We say that invalid OTP, and then we tell the user invalid verification code, right? So that's our message there. And then here we change this to app.invalid. Just remember to save this first, and then say invalid verification code. So if the OTP is not found, the entire application would pause, would abort, and then return the error code 422 with this message here, app.invalid verification code. Now, if the message is found, then we want to update the user. In this case, we want to say the user email verified at is equal to, for my date, I'm going to use Carbon, which is a nice tool. So we have Carbon, and then I'm going to say update. Now this will save the changes I've made to the database, right? So we update the user, and then we update the token as well, the OTP as well. So OTP active is now 0, and then we can say we want to keep track of when this was done, so updated that now. And then we want to also save the changes that we made, right? Once this is done, we want to return the user that we just updated. Okay, so we go back to our controller, and at this point we have the user being returned, and then we want to first change this message and say that verification success. Great. And we go to our translation file here, and then we create verification success, and just like the registration, we can just go ahead and change this and say verification successful, right, with our exclamation mark, and then good. Now we come back to our controller, and then we put that message here. Great. We would also want to return the results, which is in this case our user, and the user is going to be a new user resource of the user that we have. Great. Now let's go ahead and test our verification endpoint. I'll go to Postman. I first duplicate this and call it verify account, right? Then I go ahead and change this to verify. Okay, and now in the body, I'm going to need to pass the OTP. So we are going to try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have my token. Now, if I do not have the token and I send it, it's going to say unauthenticated 401. Now, if I pass the token, it's going to complain about the verification code not being valid. Now you get this exception and everything, and that's because the application is currently in debug mode. So if you scroll down to your environment variable and you change this to false, and you come back and then you send this again, you realize it sends only the message. Now, if you're in debug mode or debug is enabled, you get a bit more, which tells you exactly where this line. So online 66 in our auth service, and we can verify online 66 in our auth service. Here we are throwing this error, right? Great. Now this is because the verification code is invalid. What if we do not pass the verification code? It tells us the verification code is there. I'm going to log in as myself. This is me. I'm logged in here, and I'm going to request a new verification code. So I'm going to go ahead and request a new verification code that is sent to my email. I go to my email, I get a new verification code. Now I get to see this because Google is translating, so I can just switch the email because Google detects that Penger is Norwegian and is translating. So now this is my new verification code. Now what happens if I pass the correct verification code here? It tells me my verification code is invalid. Now that's because we have an error in the code and I would want us to make the fix. Now what we are sending here is we are sending the OTP, but in our verify method here we are saying that request.code, and the request does not have a code but it rather has the OTP. So I'll go ahead and make this change, go back to my postman and send it again. Now it says verification successful and we have the user payload, and now you have the new verification code here. Now if you go ahead and submit the same request, it will tell you the invalid verification code. Now that's because the active is no longer 1, it was set to 0. Great. So now we've been able to log in, register user, log in the user, send the verification code and verify this verification code. We used Google Mail as our SMTP server to be able to send emails for free. In our next episode, we will finalize the authentication API by setting up the 2 endpoints, one for sending the email to reset the password. So with the password reset, we are going to send the verification code to the user's email, and then they'll provide the verification code alongside their new password to reset their password. So remember to subscribe if you are not, and click on the notification bell to get notified on the next update. See you.